Hey guys, it's Miss Nelson here. I'm going to make this video to show you how to create your Works Cited. You're going to begin in Google Classroom and you're going to open up the assignment that says Works Cited Assignment. You're basically going to follow through these 5 steps. Through these steps, you will, of course, watch this video. You will look at a sample Works Cited. You will also look at written instructions on how to complete a Works Cited. You're then going to take a quiz that holds you responsible for reviewing and going through this information. And then you're going to create your actual Works Cited. Now, the Works Cited that you're creating is to showcase the resources that I gave you for your poster project. So when you create your Works Cited, you are citing on this document the sources that I gave you to read underneath your presidential speech. For example, if I was doing Kennedy's inaugural address, my Works Cited is going to include the citation for this source, the second source, and the third source. In order to create your Works Cited, you're going to use a tool which I have linked right here in the Google Doc. Just simply click on the here and then click on the link. This is a really good tool. It's been around for a long time. I recommend that you bookmark it or keep it in mind as you move forward in your education. There are other tools out there on the web, but I find this one the easiest to use. When you come to this link, you will see that it's making sure that you are in fact a student and a live human being, and it's simply asking you to enter a number 0 through 9. Once you enter that number, it's going to open up for you the resources here on the side, and this is your menu of options that you're going to choose from. Now, your first Works Cited for me is really easy, and that all of your resources that I've given you for the project are in fact from the internet. So you will use either website page, magazine article for your Works Cited. Some of you might even use an encyclopedia or reference work article. So the first thing you have to do is go back to my site, and you're going to need to open up your source. Now this is an encyclopedia, so when I go back to my citation tool, I'm going to choose encyclopedia or reference, but I'm going to choose the one underneath internet. I'm going to look at my source to see if there's any sort of author, and I do in fact see that there is. His name is Michael Levy. So I'm going to come back to my tool and I'm going to type in Levy, Michael. Now when you type into this form, you have to type using correct capitalization. You will lose points on your final Works Cited if you are not capitalizing proper nouns or any words that you would find within the title of your article. So the next point that I'm looking at is the title of the actual article within the encyclopedia. And the title of this particular article is United States Presidential Election of 1960. I can simply copy that and paste that in. It'll reformat the font for me. I do want to come in though and correct my capitalization. I'm then going to go and get the title of the actual website. The title of the actual website is up here in the left-hand corner. So it's Encyclopedia Britannica. If you do misspell a word, you need to make sure you're spell checking, because spelling words within your citation are just as important as capitalizing the ones that you're supposed to capitalize. I'm then going to go to website publisher or sponsor. Most of the time you're going to find this information at the bottom of the website that you're using. It usually will be right by the copyright information. Notice that I don't have a sponsor, that my website is in fact just Encyclopedia Britannica, my source, I'm sorry. So I'm going to put in N period, P period, and notice the P is lowercase, just as it reads right here in the instructions. I'm then going to go to year posted or published. So when I go back to my original source, there are 2 places I want to look. I want to look up at the top. I want to make sure there is not a specific date in which the author published the article. I then want to go down to the very bottom of the article and make sure once again that there is not a date associated to the original publication with the author. If I don't find a date there, I'm going to go down to the bottom and look at my copyright date. So for this source, I'm putting in 2017. Then I'm going to put in the date that I accessed the source. So I'm going to choose 4, I'm going to choose December, and I'm going to put in the year. Now, here is optional. It says ask the teacher. I am going to require you to provide the URL because I simply want to hold you accountable for knowing that most of the time you will have to include this information. But as the resource says, you really need to ask your teacher if they want the URL. So I simply go back to the source, I copy, and I paste the URL. Once I have filled in all the sections of the citation, I'm going to click Create Citation below. So here is my first citation from my first source. I'm now going to create my second citation. I'm going to go back to the website. I'm going to click on my second source. So this resource comes from the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. I'm going to come back over here and I'm going to cite this as a website page. It's not a magazine article, it's not a newspaper article, it's not a video recording or an email, and it's definitely not a reference or encyclopedia. So I'm going to click on website. More than likely, when you have a large institution like a library or museum sponsoring the information, you're not going to have an individual author responsible for the information. So what I'm going to do here is leave this blank, and that's okay. Once again, I'm going to go up to the title of the resource that I'm using. This is the title of the actual page. I'm going to copy that and paste it in to where it says title of work. Title of my overall website is the John F. Kennedy Presidential Library and Museum. I have to write it or type it in just as it appears. I cannot shorten or abbreviate. Website, publisher, and sponsor. Once again, I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom. I don't see anything because it's actually being sponsored by the library and museum. So I'm going to once again put in N period P period. Capital N, lowercase p. Publication date, I'm going to look at the bottom to see if I see a copyright date. Notice at the bottom of this website, I do not have a copyright date. So now I'm going to go up to my actual source and I'm going to look to see if there's any date associated to the article or to the page that I'm reading. Once again, there's not. My last place to check is under About Us. And what I'm essentially looking for at this point is a copyright date. When I go to About Us, once again, I still do not see any sort of copyright information or copyright date. I'm going to check the terms of use, privacy, accessibility. This will be my last check for a date. And again, I cannot find one. So I'm just going to leave this blank. I don't have it. And notice it says, if not available, add ND in the year box. So once again, I'm going to add N period D period. And I'm going to type it just as it appears here, lowercase n, lowercase d. This ND stands for no date. And then I'm going to put in the date I've accessed the actual website. And finally, I'm going to go back, I'm going to copy, I'm going to paste that URL, and I'm going to create citation below. Now for this particular speech and president, I had 3 citations. So I still have one more to cite. Once again, this is just a simple website. So I'm going to look to see if the information written on this history page has an actual specific author. I don't see one, so I'm going to leave this blank. I'm then going to do title of work. Now notice all of my old information is in here because I haven't changed source type. I can simply click clear form and it will delete all the information that was in there. I go in for author's name. Again, I don't have it, so I'm going to do title of the overall work, copy and paste in that title. Now, notice my capitalization isn't correct. It's all capitalized. I actually have to go in and physically correct that. So citations have to follow correct capitalization rules. Then I'm going to put in the overall website, which is history.com. Website sponsor and publisher. Again, I'll go down to the very bottom of my website and notice I do have a sponsor. It is A&E Television Networks. So I'm going to type that here. I can copy, I can paste. Notice how I caught that comma. I'm going to make sure I delete that comma. I'm going to look for a copyright date, and sure enough I have one, 2017. But more specifically, I want to make sure I don't have a specific date for the actual resource that I'm using, and I don't. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to put 2017 because that was the copyright date that I was given. And then once again, today's date, because it's the date that I've accessed the information. Create citation below. Now, the next thing I need to do is sort. And the reason I'm going to click sort, because what it's going to do is alphabetize my entries for me. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to do sort all. Notice it alphabetized by the first letter of each entry. So here I have C, K, L. This is in alphabetical order. I'm then going to click Save as a Google Doc. These citations have come in exactly how they should be formatted. They're double spaced. I'm going to go ahead and delete this end part that says who it was created by. And the only thing I need to fix at this point is my hanging indent. To create a hanging indent in a Google Doc, you're going to hit Enter, then I hit the Tab button. This is what we call a hanging indent. The second line is indented from the first line. Now technically, this URL is part of this line, but because it's being seen as one word, notice there are no spaces here, it defaults to this second line. I have to also then tab in for this second line. Now notice when I tabbed in for this second line, it indented this line one more time. I'm going to now hit backspace. This is a correct hanging indent citation for this citation. For my second source, notice that it ends on one line. And I know that my source is over when I see that period. So there's no hanging indent to create here. For my last source, I have multiple lines. So once again, I'm going to create a hanging indent. I'm going to hit Enter. I'm going to hit Tab. I'm going to go to the third line. I'm going to hit Tab again. Then I'm going to go back to that second line, and I'm going to hit Backspace so that I have a true hanging indent. This is a Works Cited page. I have a title, Works Cited. I use an S because I have 3 sources. This title is not bolded, it's not italicized, and it's not underlined. I have all of my entries in alphabetical order, C, K, L. I have all of my entries with a hanging indent. This allows the eye to visually see when each source begins. I have used correct MLA formatting for each of my sources, and I know that because I've used the MLA citation tool. I have correct capitalization. All the words that need to be capitalized are capitalized. And finally, I have double spacing, which the MLA citation tool that I've shown you actually defaults for you when it comes into the Google Doc. This is now my Works Cited page that I'm going to use on my final project. Now I'm ready to turn in my Works Cited for Ms. Nelson to check to see that I completed my work for today. So I'm going to go to Classroom. I'm going to go to the class that I'm assigned to. Once in that class, I'm going to open the assignment. Once I'm opened, I'm going to add from my Google Drive. And then from my Google Drive, I'm going to add my completed Works Cited that I have created. And then I'm going to mark the assignment as done. So let's review. MLA Works Cited. Title, alphabetical. It is all the resources that I used in my research, both in paraphrased notes and in direct quotations. Double spaced, alphabetized, hanging indent, correct capitalization, correct punctuation. Now let's say you create your Works Cited and you realize that you have a mistake. Notice here that this particular entry is incorrect. I'm going to give you a second to think about why it's incorrect. When I created this MLA citation, notice it is a website, but I forgot to include my URL. This is a simple fix. Luckily, it was the last resource I used. I'm going to come here to Optional Ask Teacher URL. I'm going to go back to my resource. I'm going to copy that link. I'm going to paste it in. I'm going to create citation below. Here is the new citation for that source. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go back to my completed works cited. I'm going to highlight the old one, paste in the new one, make sure my coloring is all correct, black font is all correct, create my hanging indent. Now I have a correct works cited. If I've already turned this in, that's okay because Google is going to update automatically, and when Ms. Nelson goes to open this document, she'll see whatever it is that I've created the last time I've created or made changes in this document. Our last thing I want to go over is how you can tell what kind of resources you're looking at. Now, for this particular works cited, every single resource was a website. And I know that because I see here that it says web, 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 but I also see with each entry I have a URL. Eventually, as you move ahead in your research, you're going to be required to have different types of sources. You'll always know what source or what kind of source it is by looking at the information that's in the actual citation. I know that this first resource is web. I see web, SEURL. Notice with this next resource, though, I don't see that information. Instead, I see print. Based on the knowledge that I have about Good Housekeeping, I know this is a magazine. I also see a date and a year. Most magazines have that information, and then page numbers. I know from looking at this particular entry that that particular source was in fact a magazine. I'm now going to look at the next source. With the next source, I once again see it's a print source. However, this time I have a title and an author. Notice I have a publication date, and notice I have a publication city. Notice with that publication information, I also have a year. Based on the formatting of this entry, I know that I'm looking at a book. To determine what kind of source your citation is indicating, you simply need to read the citation itself. There will be many clues within the citation that will show you what kind of source is being cited. I've gone over all the information you need to now take the quiz. Before creating your works cited, go back to the assignment, go to Socrative.com, enter the class code, enter your first and last name, and begin taking the quiz.